receive, we freely offer them to you. We are the hands and feet of Christ, serving by grace each other's need. We dare to ask and sacrifice with truthful word and faithful deed. Loving community we seek, your hope and strength within us move. The poor and rich, the strong and weak are brought together in your love. In loving partnership, O God, help us your nurture to proclaim. Justice and peace be our desire. We humbly pray in Jesus' name.
Hello, and welcome to this video service for the 5th Sunday of Easter, May the 15th, 2022. My name is Roger Bond, and until my move to Cape Breton Island this past summer, I was a minister of music at Wesley United Church in Fruitland, Ontario. This video service is produced for that congregation and for our friends across the internet. I hope that you'll find something of value in it, and that you'll sing along with the many hymns that you'll hear today. Let's begin by lighting our candle, our symbol of the presence of divine love in our midst.
Love gives expression
Our first reading is of selected verses from St. Paul's criticism of the infighting in the early church at Corinth. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, as found in the modern paraphrase, the Message. But for right now, friends, I'm completely frustrated by your unspiritual dealings with each other and with God. You're acting like infants in relation to Christ, capable of nothing much more than nursing at the breast. Well then, I'll nurse you, since you don't seem capable of anything more. As long as you grab for what makes you feel good or makes you look important, are you really much different than a babe at the breast, content only when things are going your way? When one of you says, I'm on Paul's side, and another says, I'm for Apollos, aren't you being totally childish? Who do you think Paul is anyway, or Apollos for that matter? Servants, both of us. Servants who waited on you as you gradually learned to entrust your lives to our mutual master. We each carried out our servant assignment. I planted the seed. Apollos watered the plants. But God made you grow. It is not the one who plants or the one who waters who is at the center of this process, but God, who makes things grow. Planting and watering are menial servant jobs at minimum wages. What makes them worth doing is the God we are serving. You happen to be God's field in which we are working. I don't want to hear any of you bragging about yourself or anyone else. Everything is already yours as a gift. Paul, Apollos, Peter, the world, life, death, the present, the future, all of it is yours. And you are privileged to be in union with Christ, who is in union with God. And a second reading, this time part of a hymn written by the Reverend Brian Wren in 1985. Christ loves the church with grace beyond all measure. We bear his name for all the world to see. He will not let us go or let us be, but chooses earthen vessels for his treasure. Christ bears the church, corrupted or conforming, obsessed with trifles, blessing greed and war. His love outwits us, spinning gold from straw, through saints and prophets, praying and reforming.
Where charity and love prevail, there God is ever found, brought here together by Christ's love. By love are we thus bound. With grateful joy and holy fear is charity begun. Let us with heart and mind and strength now love him in return. Forgive we now each other's faults as we our faults confess, and let us love each other well in Christian holiness. Let strife among us be unknown, that all contention cease. His the glory that we seek, be ours his holy peace. Love can exclude no grace or grief, if honor be God's name. Our common life embraces all, whose Father is the same.
And Jesus' words, as found in the 13th chapter of John's Gospel. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you should also love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another.
I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. That you love one another. That you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you should also love one another. Just as I have loved you, you should also love one another. By this will everyone will know that you are my disciples, that you are my disciples. If you have love, if you have love, if you have love for one another. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. That you love one another. That you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you should also love one another. Just as I have loved you, you should also love one another.
Thanks to the miracle of the internet, it's very easy to find dire predictions about the future of Christianity, the Church, the United Church of Canada. Poll after poll shows fewer people claiming a religious affiliation. Many people claim to be spiritual, not religious. We hear of church after church closing, or amalgamating, or downsizing, or just barely surviving. And thanks to the miracle of the internet, it is just as easy to find lists of reasons that people are leaving the church. 5 reasons, 10 reasons. Each list is somewhat different, but a couple of reasons are common to almost every list. One common reason for leaving the church could be called an apparent lack of focus on outreach. Many churches are perceived to be inward-looking, concerned mostly with their own survival, their own worship needs, their own social gatherings, their own members, instead of reaching out to those most in need in the world around us. I think this needs to be an ongoing challenge for every church to take seriously. When we look at the Gospels, we know that Jesus did. A second reason for leaving that is common to most of the top 5 or top 10 lists is conflict within the church, or the way that church people treat each other or treat the person who's decided to leave. Sometimes it's a disillusionment with the jockeying for power. One person close to me, an organist and choir director for many years, left because of the manipulative power struggles between her congregation's 2 ordained ministers and the ensuing faction fight that pretty much destroyed that congregation. Other times, it may be a top-down abuse of power. One friend and former colleague, an Anglican priest beloved of his congregation, endured years of being put down by his bishop, and since retiring a year or 2 ago, has not been back to church. Sometimes it's a feeling of being ignored or disregarded. Your opinions don't matter, or you're left out. My mother was actively involved in every church she attended until her health and my dad's impeded their ability to go to church. Then they heard nothing from their current church. Not from the minister, not from the pastoral care visitors, nobody. Until the church wanted money, then they were back on the radar. That turned my mother off church for the rest of her life. Sometimes, the closer you get to the center of church activity, the more unchristian that activity seems. I know lots of people who sit in the pew on Sunday mornings who have no idea what goes on in committees or parish councils or church boards or regional or national synods or councils, and would be appalled if they knew. Sometimes they end up on one of those committees or boards, and sometimes their experience there sours them on the whole church experience. At other times, they may decide to stay and try to make a difference, in spite of being repeatedly frustrated or hurt by the infighting and meanness. Maybe they'll try to change things from the inside. Or perhaps they'll leave that congregation and seek healing at another. That's happened to Barbara and me more than once. So I wonder, what do we understand Jesus to mean when he says, I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. How many times does he say, love one another? How does that guide our actions in our churches, our committees, our boards and councils, in what we say, what we do, how we speak to each other, how we speak about each other? Let's think about some of the words that we sing. In loving partnership we come, serving by grace each other's need. Here the love of Christ shall end divisions. We are here to help each other walk the mile and bear the load. Forgive we now each other's faults as we our faults confess. Let strife among us be unknown. Let all contention cease. Help us learn to love each other with a love that constant stays. Teach us trust in one another and in you, our gracious God. Can we try a little harder to live up to some of those words that we sing so blithely? We know that Christ loves us and loves the church, in spite of all the ways that we fall short. But can we try? By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Can that be our goal? This next hymn was so overused in the 60s and 70s that I've only used it once in the past 50 years. But I think that it's one that we should sing today.
Save each one's pride, and they'll know
words of J. McDaniel, let us pray. In this century and in any century, our deepest hope, our most tender prayer, is that we learn to listen. May we listen to one another in openness and mercy. May we listen to plants and animals in wonder and respect. May we listen to our own hearts in love and forgiveness. May we listen to God in quietness and awe. And in this listening, which is boundless in its beauty, may we find the wisdom to cooperate with the healing Spirit, a divine Spirit who beckons us into peace and community and creativity. We do not ask for a perfect world, but we do ask for a better world. We ask for deep listening. We often say that our church community at Wesley is a family. So in that spirit, let us sing, would you bless our homes and families.
Would you bless our homes and families, source of life who calls us here, in a world of stress and tension, teach us love that conquers fear. Help us learn to love each other with a love that constant stays. Teach us when we face our troubles, love's expressed in many ways. When our way is undemanding, let us use the time that's ours to delight in simple pleasures, sharing joys in gentle hours. When our way is anxious walking and a heavy belly plod, teach us trust in one another and in you, our gracious God. From the homes in which we're nurtured, with a love that shapes us there, teach us not to play as family, everyone whose life we share. And through all that life may offer, may meaning more love remain. May the love we share in families be a life to enjoy. Let us reach beyond the boundaries, so our daily thought and care, till our family you have chosen, stirs its love out everywhere. Help us learn to love each other with love that constant stays. Teach us when we face our troubles, love's expressed in many ways.
Well, that brings us to the end of our service for today. Thank you for joining me. I hope that something I've said or something that we've sung together has touched you or given you something to ponder in your hearts. Since there are 5 Sundays in May, I'll be taking next week off, and I'll be back with another video service for May the 29th, the Sunday after the Ascension. And I need to let you know that as a result of a vote taken by a majority of the Unified Board at Wesley United, that service for May the 29th will be my last service for Wesley. 2022 is a rather momentous year for me. I turned 70 a couple of weeks ago. Barbara and I have been together for 30 years. I've been a church organist for 55 years and have directed church choirs, including the multi-tract work for the last 2 years, for 50 years. I've greatly enjoyed my years as Wesley's Minister of Music, and especially these video services which, for the past 2 years, have stretched my abilities musically, technologically, and more recently, theologically. I thank you for your support, your trust, and your friendship.
Let us build a house where love can dwell and all can safely live. A place where saints and children tell how hearts learn to forgive. Built of hopes and dreams and visions, proud of faith and vault of grace. Here the love of Christ shall end divisions. All are welcome, all are welcome, all are welcome in this place. Let us build a house where prophets speak and words are strong and true, where all God's children dare to seek to dream God's reign anew. Here the cross shall stand as witness and a symbol of God's grace. Here as one we claim the faith of Jesus. All are welcome, all are welcome, all are welcome in this place. Let us build a house where lands will reach beyond the wood and stone, to hear and strengthen, serve and teach, and live the word they've known. In the outcast and the stranger, bear the image of God's face. Let us bring an end to fear and danger. All are welcome, all are welcome, all are welcome in this place. Let us build a house where all our names, their songs and visions heard, and love their treasure taught and claimed as words within the word. Built of tears and cries and laughter, prayers of faith and songs of grace. Let this house proclaim from floor to rafter. All are welcome, all are welcome, all are welcome in this place.
It seems appropriate, given today's theme, that we end with the sung benediction, which is part of Wesley's tradition.
We are one as we hear, heart and hand unite. In the word we receive, there's a sense that God is light. We are one as we live, as we love, we are loved, and we seek justice in God's grace as we